Hello folks, welcome to Canal Channel Jose. Today we're going to give you an idea how to replace a fuel pump on a Kubota BX25D. And so these are little tractors, they got a fuel pump in the bottom, and we're going to show you a little bit and give you an idea how this process is done. What the symptoms were on this tractor is that they'll turn on the tractor, try to turn it on, and it will start up and then die, like if it was a clog filter. So another case, it was if it's going uphill, the gravity, it will shut down on gravity because the gravity wasn't feeding the engine on the front because the tank is towards the driver's seat. So, and if it's going downhill, it will stay on longer. So because the gravity will feed the engine and the fuel pump will just let it through. So that were the symptoms. So another thing that we're gonna do.
So since we're changing the fuel pump, might as well change the filter on it. That way the system runs correctly because it's diesel power engine. So that'll be a good tip, and it's easy to change.
Yeah, and diesel is a little dirtier than gasoline, so this is oily, so that is gonna catch bigger particles. So like Luis said, it's a really good idea to replace a fuel filter if you put in a brand new pump as well. And one thing is that they're gonna say is that the fuel pump is before the filter, but that's how the system is made on these tractors. So if you can get a filter before the fuel pump, that'll be better because you can save some of the life on the fuel pump, and then you can extend the working hours on it. There's two forms to replace the fuel pump in this tractor. There's the one where you can have the platform for cutting the grass underneath install. You can reach in there and get your hands in there. But for us, we're gonna take all this platform out. So because we're gonna drive the tractor after that without that platform, and that way it's easier for us to work on the fuel pump. But you can do it while the platform is on, but it's gonna be a little crowded.
We got about 6 inches, not even 6 inches right now, but we're gonna take it off, and that's gonna expose the whole thing, and we're gonna work with ratchets and all the good stuff.
So the job is easier, but you can do it while the platform is installed. You just gotta drop the deck. And with that said, let's get started. Okay folks, so to disengage and get this deck out of the way, we're gonna have to first disengage the drive shaft from the tractor to the blades. And once we do that, we're gonna disconnect there's a lever on one side, there's the rear wheel in the bottom, and there's another lever on the other side that we gotta pull out to disconnect the deck from the tractor. Then there's gonna be in the front, there's a hooking device that we have to undo to get that deck out of the way. So first we have to disengage first the drive shaft, otherwise the weight is gonna hung into it and you're not gonna be able to disconnect that drive shaft. So don't disconnect the deck from the tractor, disengage the drive shaft first. So to disengage the drive shaft for the deck is right in the back over here in this area. And we're gonna zoom in and it's back there, so we're gonna show you how we do that. Okay folks, so here's the drive shaft coupling, and then what we're gonna be doing is before you disconnect the platform or the deck from the tractor, you want to disengage the shaft, because otherwise once the weight hangs off the drive shaft or the deck, it might affect the drive shaft because the weight is pulling on your drive shaft. So you want to disconnect, and to do that there's this coupling that you got to pull forward like this to disengage it. So it's a locking device, so it doesn't come off while you're operating the blades. So now we're going to show you how we do this. So now we're going to disconnect the deck. Once we disconnect the shaft, and then we have to pull this lever here. There's one on one side, driver and passenger side, what we call it. And then once we disconnect the drive shaft, this is what you do next, and then we go to the front. So now we're gonna pull this lever on this side like we did on the other side. So then the deck drops from the back completely because we already have disconnected the shaft as well. So now we have disconnected the back piece attachment from that end, and this side there's a drive shaft disconnected from the tractor, and there's a fuel pump that we need to replace. So now there's a lever for the front to disengage the deck completely, but you're not going to be able to push this lever. Even if it looks like a lever, you have to go on the passenger side, what we call it, and pull a pin so that way it drops and disengages from the tractor. So now there's the lever on this side, but the pin is on the other side. They should have put the pin on this side with a lever so that way it makes sense, but no, They put both things in different areas. So let's go on the other side and show you what we mean. So now we have the pin on this side and then the lever on the other side. They should put both in one end and one side, but they did it opposite. So now we just pull this pin out and this should roll and drop. So now to get this platform or the deck out, Luis is on the other side lifting the mechanism where hydraulics will lift it, but due to the tractor not turning on and the deck being down, we have to lift it manually like he's doing, so it doesn't get on the way when we pull the deck out. So he's gonna pull it up, hold it while I pull this out. Now there's a fuel pump right there. There's two bolts that hold that fuel pump. There's a frame, and as we can see, the back tires of it is right underneath there. There's an inlet on the back and the outlet, and there's a connector for the fuel pump. So now we just gotta remove that, and socket that fit there is a 12 millimeter, and we got two clamps, but we're gonna put the tied on clamps, the ones that you can tighten in. These are just compression, so we're replacing those as well. So the socket on this bolt on this side is a 12 millimeter, and the one on this side is a 10 millimeter. And the reason why this is smaller is because the space between the filter and the dry shaft that goes to the front, and you're gonna have to, it's gonna be a little harder to get that one out than this side over here because of dry shaft. So now we're gonna be disconnecting the fuel pump, and then you gotta press that tab like Luis is doing to release it from the blue point. So now what we're going to be doing is we're using some vice grips to compress the hose on the fuel line coming out of the tank, so that way we can remove the fuel pump and the fuel doesn't keep on coming because of the gravity. So that's what we're doing. That's going to work for us. Take those clamps off, and then we can disconnect the fuel pump and put the new one in. Okay, folks, so even if the connector is blue and white and all that, the color doesn't mean anything. What you want to make sure is that the connectors are the same, because that's where you're going to have the most problems connecting the fuel pump. So now that we know that the fuel pump is the same connector, now we can continue and taking off the fuel pump completely. But that's one thing that you want to make sure when you buy a fuel pump, that the connectors are compatible and they're the same connector to what the tractor needs to take. So once you know that, that's the main thing. So now we're going to be taking off the clamps so we can remove the hose from the old fuel pump. With time, the hoses are going to get stuck to the fuel pump, so you're going to have to use some pliers to turn it and loosen it from the fuel pump. So as you can see, it's coming out now easier. So you're going to have to do something like that. So there we have both fuel pumps, the old one and the new one, and now we continue with the new one. The one with the black caps is the new one, and then as you can see the tips, you want to make sure that you put the right side, and then the length of how much hose goes into it, and then you're gonna put the clamps as well. So now we go in there and put the new fuel pump in, and the vice grips are helping us from the fuel coming and dropping from the tank. So now we're gonna put the fuel pump, and there's another fuel filter down here. So get a second fuel filter because we just have one, and you wanna replace this because that can be the problem as well. So there's a second fuel filter. There's one right before the fuel pump. So now Luis is taking out the 10 millimeter bolt that is bolting the clamp against the frame, and then now we can take that clamps off the fuel filter, and that's before the fuel pump. So you got two fuel filters on this tractor. This one looks pretty dirty. It looks really dark, so that could be the problem, not the fuel pump. But we're replacing a brand new $22 fuel pump, and then we're gonna replace filter. So this is a bad location for this fuel filter because who wouldn't seen it? Who would seen this? So it's kind of hidden. So we continue by removing that fuel filter. So now Luis is going to attach the bracket for the fuel filter on the back. Is ready to go. Everything's put together. The fuel pump is ready to go. is connected. So now what we're gonna be doing before we attach the fuel pump to the frame, we're gonna start the tractor to make sure everything's right. Luis is showing this plate that we took off, and there's 2 bolts on each side, 9/16 that we took off to get us give us a little bit more clearance for the fuel filter, because the clamps and all the brackets, the bracket to the frame. So now we have put that together, and before we start putting everything back on place, we're gonna make sure that the tractor starts. That way we know if something is not right, we can check it, and we don't have to take everything apart like we did. So now we gonna start the tractor. So now Luis is showing us where the fuel comes in into the engine. So that hose, we disconnected it, and we turn on the key so we can get the air out of the system. So with that said, now that we have fuel all the way to here, diesel, now we can start the tractor, or try to start it. And you want to make sure you check your liquid shit, like the engine oil, coolant, and all that, that is topped off. That way when you start your tractor, you don't damage any equipment. That way, if it hasn't been run for a while, now you know that everything's good, so that way you don't damage it. So now we start the tractor. Luis has just put up the 10mm bolt. Now he's about to put the 12mm bolt that holds the fuel pump to the frame. This is putting the last bolt on the fuel pump, and that's a 12mm. We're done. We'll just put a zip tie on this line to hold it into it, and that should be the replacement of this fuel pump on this tractor. And well, folks, this was an idea on how to replace the fuel pump on a Kubota BX25D. And these little tractors have the fuel pump underneath, but you have to remove the deck for cut the grass out of the way so you can get to it, or you can get to it with it, but it's gonna be a little harder. So the fuel pump is right underneath. There's a fuel filter right before the fuel pump, and there's one at the engine compartment. So you got 2 filters for this tractor. So this was an idea how to do this replacement. So that way, in case you have to do this maintenance or replacement of the fuel pump to your tractor, you got an idea how to do it. And for our folks who are watching our video and have to subscribe to our channel, please subscribe. If you like our video, give us thumbs up, share it, and we'll see you soon with more videos here in el canal, El Chano Jose.